So who am I? Like I said, I'm Dylan Steven. I'm the principal of 118 Group. This webinar is all about how to invest in websites. And the reason I wanted to do this was because there is a lot, I'm constantly having conversations with potential clients around what is important when it comes to investing in websites. And it's clear to me that there's a lot of misconceptions and there's a lot of knowledge that's lacking when it comes to people looking for websites, bringing that knowledge to the table, having smart conversations with potential agencies or partners. And I think an educated consumer, an educated investor is a smarter investor. And it's better for partners and it's better for everybody if there's some of these misconceptions are kind of cleared up. So, I think one of the main misconceptions around website investments is that you have to have one, right? Like you need to have a website. And while I run a web design shop, I do believe that to be the case. The problem with people kind of coming into conversations that way is they look at websites as just costs of doing business, right? And so they don't look at it as an investment, and they don't think about ROI, and they don't think about value. And so that's what I'm hoping to kind of work through today with you guys is to talk about what's your, how do you approach this? How do you look at it as an investment, and how do you treat it as an investment when it comes to kind of what you spend and what you get? So at a high level, we're going to go through setting expectations. So, for yourself and others, and kind of just understanding what you're getting yourself into if you're kind of about to start this process. Questions you need to ask yourself as the, key decision maker. How to set budgets. This is the big one. This is the one that I think, has the greatest amount of misconceptions and confusion. Hiring the right team, obviously critical. And then project success. So hopefully this is even less than an hour, so stick with me. Again, my role at 118 Group has been facilitating the sales process for people who want websites. I know a lot about this. This is kind of like my realm of expertise. So if you are considering spending money on a website or hiring somebody, I'm going to tell you what you need to think about, what you need to know, how much you should be spending, so that you don't either get taken advantage of, which I'm not saying that, that's going to happen, but it's possible, or B, just mistaken, make mistakes, costly mistakes, mistakes of time, mistakes of energy, all those important things. So let's get right into it. Setting expectations. Number one, great websites take time and collaboration. Okay websites, bad websites don't take either of those things. But if you want a great website, it's going to take you time and it's going to require your input. It's going to require you to be at the table and having those discussions, right? And so, that's going to come into kind of later setting the project up for success. Websites are only one piece of a larger puzzle. And I feel like this is important to say because a lot of times, what I hear from people indicates that the perception around websites is that they're what I'd call a panacea or like a cure-all, right? Like you take this one pill and all of your problems go away. If I just spend a bunch of money on this website, my business, my nonprofit, my organization, like everything gets better. And it's like, no. And if you expect that, you're going to be disappointed. It is a single piece of a larger puzzle. And that's going to be really important when it comes to deciding how much to spend, because you don't want to spend all your money on one piece of the puzzle. So, and then the other thing is that building a great website is complex. I think there's a misconception around websites because there are tools to do it yourself, something like Squarespace, Wix, or Weebly. The kind of perception is that it must be easy to do. If I can sign up for an account and build a website, it must not be that hard. And you can build a website. You can have a page, add a domain. You can do that yourself. You can do it cheap, but that's not going to be a great website. And we're going to talk about that. And it really is going to come down to what you value and what's important to you. But it's complicated. It's the intersection of art, and through design, technology, right? Because we're working on the web that's constantly evolving, and there's constant trends and updates to be aware of. Strategy, because a website is a tool. It's a tool that drives business and growth. And then content, data, all that stuff It just kind of keeps layering in. So it is complex. Don't don't treat it like something. It's not like mowing your lawn, right? Where it's like anybody with a lawnmower can go out there and do it. And there's not a huge difference between a great lawnmower and an okay lawnmower. There's a large discrepancy between the two. So things you want to ask yourself before you get into this. So what am I hoping to accomplish with this investment? So a lot of times, again, if you go into it with the mindset that like, this is just a cost of doing business and I just need to check this box off and I just need to have one, it's like, that's not a really great reason to invest in something, right? How much is accomplishing this goal worth to me, right? What am I hoping to do? How much is it worth? Again, these are the questions that are going to drive spend. How do you measure success, right? Like what would I consider be success? Could I measure it? And like, what does the return on this investment look like? And also really important, what kind of an experience do I want as a client? Like there's a lot of different client experiences out there for websites, right? And so like you get to decide when you're going through this process, what kind of an experience you want. Do you want to be really involved? Do you want to be not involved? Do you want it to be super fast? Do you want to, get to control the situation? Do you want to like relinquish control? Do you want to be pampered? Do you not really care about the pampering? Like these are all questions, and there's different partners who fit different areas. So you really want to ask yourself what kind of an experience you want. So budget, this is critical, right? This is the big stuff, right? Like how much do I spend on a website? This is the question we get all the time, right? Like how much does a website cost? Like what is the cost of a website? And I always go back to the a kind of a joke, but it's another kind of example. It's this question formed in a different way. It's like, how long is a piece of string? And it's like, well, a piece of string, it depends, right? What do you need it for? Like, there's no answer to that, right? So I think when it comes to websites, people think that they have a discrete, specific cost, like a commodity, like, price of oil or price of corn or like a refrigerator, like I think they consider that because it has a defined real estate on your screen, right? Like we all interact with websites through whether it's our phone or our screens, and those things have a defined number of pixels, length by width. And so in our minds, we kind of reduce it down to, okay, this is the real estate. They all share the same amount of real estate. They all kind of roughly, behave the same. They have a cost. And so I'm hoping to dispel that misconception, because they do not have a cost. For example, you can go to a platform called Fiverr, Fiverr.com. And here I've highlighted, here are some really cheap, web partners, right? So we're talking $10, $15. Some of these are just mock-ups, but it gives you the idea, right? Like you can get a website done for $100, and through some of these platforms. And I encourage you to check this out. Like I always, when I have clients who are, really trying to cost cut and save money, it's like, well, go to Fiverr and try one of those experiences. But then you have something like, you can go to clutch.co, which is more the higher end of this. And then, you can see price tags. We're talking $75,000 plus, $25,000 plus, $25,000 plus. Like what gives? Like how do we have such a large is there anything else? Can you imagine anything else that besides maybe like luxury goods or cars, perhaps, maybe not even, that have such a large discrepancy in price? And it's especially kind of shocking because a lot of times we have this perception that websites have a cost. So I think, I've spent a lot of time thinking about this. Like, why is there so much price variance in the website investment space? And the best way I can kind of like break it down is that websites are a result of are both a product and a service, right? Like, so the website itself, the way, the deliverable at the end of the project, at the end of the relationship, is a product, right? It's all packaged up. It works by itself, essentially. And it's a service as well, because you're having someone curate it, design it, deliver it, develop it, launch it. So it's both a product and a service. And products have reasons for having price variance, right? There's a lot of different cost factors when it comes to products, and there's a lot of different cost factors when it comes to a service, right? So when when you have something that is both of those things, you multiply the variability. And so, for example, service costs, different things that impact the cost of a service. Like, and this is just about any service, is like the offerings, obviously, like what services are being rendered as part of this engagement, the professionalism of the service, the reputation of the firm, the speed at which the service is being, implemented, executed, delivered, right? So those are all like a few just real high level service cost factors. And then you also have product cost factors, quality being a huge one, right? Like how well thought out, well designed is this deliverable? How complex is it? Like how much development, like what kind of development skills and ideas are needed, and software as well, like what kind of tools, integrations need to be considered. So you have these cost factors on the service side, and then you have these cost factors on the product side, and then they multiply by each other, and then you get a website that's quoted for, you can get a website for $75K, or you can get a website for $100. So, it's kind of sits in that unique place of being both a product and a service, and that's my understanding of why there can be such a variance. And so the question is, what works for you, right? And so what is best for you specifically? And I like to walk through kind of a tale of two websites, right? To try and show how your situation and your circumstances and your scenario and your needs should drive this decision making, and could result in two completely different costs for the same kind of for a website, right? Which I say that here because there's so much variance, right? So we're gonna take Blogger Bob. He's gonna be our first kind of case study, right? So he's a carpenter full time. He loves to cook, and he specifically has this niche for like Korean street food that you can do at home, right? So he's got kind of a niche. His family says it's great. They keep telling him you need to like put a blog up, you need to get a recipe going, a recipe blog going. He's like, all right, I'm gonna maybe I can make some money here. Maybe this is a bit of a side hustle I could pursue. I'm gonna launch a recipe blog. So he decides he wants a website to kind of share his recipes. He knows he needs like a photo gallery. He needs to like be able to like sort all of his recipes and kind of filter them by, whatever filters he wants to do, whether that's the time it takes to make them or kind of the sub, meatless, yada, yada, yada. And then a contact page for anyone who wants to collaborate. So well-defined, like ready to go. He tried to do Wix, like he tried to use one of these DIY platforms, but just got frustrated and nothing ended up looking the way he wants. And everybody wants to DIY a website until they try and DIY a website. And then they're like, why isn't this working for me? Why can't I get it to look the way I want it to look? And then so he decides to hire somebody. And so Bob goes around and starts sourcing some website quotes, right? He calls a few different designers to kind of get a sense of, what is this going to cost me? How much is this going to cost for this blog? And he gets three options, right? He gets Freelancer Fred, and we'll talk about some of these partner types. He gets Local Louise, and he gets Agency Adam. So Freelancer Fred, he's a solo entrepreneur, independent contractor. He's offering really defined templates, a 5-page limit, one round of revisions. Like you don't get to nitpick this to death, but I'll do it really fast, right? Like I'll turn this around immediately. There's a lot of one-day website builders out there. You have Local Louise, who does, she's going to offer some custom design. So you can, there's not templates. We're going to start from what your needs are. There's still a limit. You get more revisions, and it's going to take more time though. The customized design, your revisions, it's going to take 8 weeks to turn it around. And then Local Louise runs a small business. She's got a team of designers and developers. And then you have Agency Adam, and he works for a big name agency, probably located in a city somewhere, near the city near where Bob is looking. And he's got a big staff. They're talking completely custom design, unlimited revisions. And they want to include a search engine strategy for this Korean recipe, idea, and some content development. Like they've got writers on staff, they've got search engine optimization specialists. They want to really throw the kitchen sink at this thing. And so obviously the prices vary, right? So still the same 5-page limit, still the same website, but we're talking, differences in the services being offered and the quality of the services being offered, right? So and the experience that the client gets. And so Bob ultimately, obviously he says Agency Adam is out, like he just cannot justify spending $10,000 on this side hustle website that he's not sure he's ever going to see an ROI from. He wants to work with local Louise, but it's still a little expensive. Like he's just trying to experiment. He's just trying to see if there's any traction for this. And he knows that he might just give up on this whole recipe idea. He's done it before in 3 or 4 weeks. So he's like, even though he's not thrilled about the predefined templates, from Freelancer Fred, like he wishes he had more control. He's got a vision for this. He decides $250 is, what I should spend on this. So that's what makes sense for Fred. Then you have someone like Nonprofit Nancy. This is a bit of a different scenario, right? So she is the executive director of a growing nonprofit organization. They recently just got a $100,000 grant from a local foundation, and they've earmarked that money for improving their image and their marketing, with the hope of amplifying their message, growing their volunteer and donor base, and providing easier access to their services for their constituents, right? So the current website, it's a total pain to administer. It's outdated. Nobody likes it. And Nancy's not crazy about her current web team, right? So she stepped in maybe a year ago, and the web team was kind of already there, and she doesn't really work great with them. They don't really, that's not really a good style fit. She feels like they're not super responsive, and the quality is just not there. So she's like, all right, I'm going to go source some quotes. So she asks around, because that's what she does. She kind of talks to some of her board of directors or some of her colleagues that are executive directors elsewhere, and then does some digital online research and gets quotes from some potential partners. So for her, she lined up. She didn't want to go with the Freelancer. She decided that the Freelancer, it's too important to kind of have a single person responding, responsible for this. So she's like, all right, I'm going to find a local team. I'm going to find a small agency that might not be as local. And I'll get a quote from a big agency, like a real big agency, right? Like this is $100,000 where, we have some cash to play with. Let's see what they have to offer. And so the local team, they're all, whether it's a local team, small agency, big agency, all offering the same kind of rough scope in terms of number of pages, which is typically, when you're spending money on a website, typically, I talk to people who that is their consideration of scope, right? It's like number of pages, but it's obviously much more nuanced than that, right? So the local team, they're generalists, so they don't have necessarily a ton of experience with nonprofits, but they've got general experience. They've worked with hotels, restaurants, real estate agents, contractors. So they have knowledge of the web. They're generalists. They're ready to go right now. They kind of take a templated design. They kind of start with a template. They're not big into like research strategy, data analysis, and they don't really have a support infrastructure in place, right? So like they will kind of be around if you have problems, but they don't really have solid support processes and offerings in place. But they're relatively inexpensive, $5,000, for a bigger nonprofit site. That's definitely the value option here. So the small agency, 15 pages still, same kind of scope, industry experience. So they've done work with nonprofits. They don't consider themselves experts, but they've experience with nonprofits. They have a wait list. They got clients already kind of in the pipeline. They need some time. They're going to offer kind of a customized design approach. They do some research, and they offer kind of they have a better support infrastructure. So, and then there's the big agency, and this is the same number of pages, but they're industry experts, so they specialize specifically in nonprofits. They have a long wait list because they have a great reputation. They have a lot of organizations that want to work with them. They have a long wait list. They have customized design. They do thorough research. They have a really solid strategy and research phase. And their support is killer. You look online, their reputation, their support is awesome. So Nonprofit Nancy has these 3 options here. First, she discounts the local team, because it's too cheap, and this is an important thing to consider, right? She's her reputation on the line as the executive director is on the line. Her reputation, the organization's reputation is on the line, right? Like they don't want to go backwards with their website. That's not a good look. They're trying to like step into the future with this new grant. and $5,000 to her is a signal that like they're not ready for this, or they don't value this work the same way she values it, right? Like she's trying to like, she's taking this seriously. $5,000 to her is not a signal of seriousness. So she discounts the local team for being too cheap. The big agency, she really likes their industry expertise, right? She wants to work with specialists. They understand, the ins and outs of nonprofits, how they work. And she really likes their support, which was a big pain point with her current web team. But she just can't justify spending 40% of this grant on the website. She's got other priorities with that money as well. She has other investments she wants to make in terms of outreach, marketing, operational improvements. She can't justify the 40% of that grant. So she kind of has to discount the big agency, even though she liked what they had to offer. And the small agency is kind of that sweet spot in the middle, right? So they have experience in the nonprofit area. They don't have a super long wait list, and 15,000 is a better value for her. She thinks that's more serious than the 5K, but not as big of an investment as the big agency. So, for her, the small agency is the way to go. And so here, basically the point of this is to show that the same website, in terms of like number of pages and real estate on screen, can have drastically different prices due to the quality of the service being offered here, the types of services being offered, and the level of expertise that these different firms are bringing. And so it's again to dispel that notion that like, well, it takes up the same, it's a tab in a window on my monitor, on my laptop, on my phone. It's got the same number of pixels. It should cost the same. This is to dispel that myth that like there's a lot of reasons why different websites cost different amounts of money. I mean, you think about how much does a house cost, right? Like if you went to a remodeler or a builder, a custom home builder, and you said, how much does a house cost? There'd be a lot of questions before they give you a price. Even if that house had the same square footage, the same, 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom, same square footage, there's plenty of reasons why they might cost different, right? It could be the countertops, it could be the hardwood flooring, it could be, the features in the bathroom, it could be, the energy efficiency, it could be the insulation, it could be it could be all sorts of things that create kind of that discrepancy in cost. Same thing with websites, and then again, like with the builder, it's like, you want to prioritize this, you want us to do this, fast, you want to, like what kind of experience do you want as a client? You want weekly meetings, you want to kind of see the place every other week, things to consider. So what do you spend then? Like what, ultimately it's going to come down to what you value and how important this website is for what you're trying to accomplish. For Blogger Bob, it's really not that important. He's just trying to experiment, like see if there's any opportunities here. For Nonprofit Nancy, it's her reputation. It's the future of her nonprofit. She needs to spend, it's really important to her. And this is kind of the what you spend, what you get S-curve, and it's, it actually, if you're a web designer out there, WYSIWYG, which is like a what you see is what you get. Here it's kind of what you spend and what you get is what you get. And what you'll notice is you have this zone of poor performance and you have this zone of overvaluation, right? So, if you're not spending enough, you're not investing enough in the project yourself. Like you're not dedicating enough energy to this project. You're not taking it seriously. Think about like all the times you've, bought in something cheap and then you threw it out or you didn't care for it because it was cheap, right? Like, so if you underspend, you'll be less invested as a client in the success here. And you're probably getting a worse service. Web design is a competitive marketplace with lots of players. There's not a lot of people, maybe 20 years ago, but today you can't charge a lot and give a little, there's just too much competition. There's too much information out there around reputation and performance. And so typically, what you spend is what you get in the web world to some extent. There's a lot of niche cases where that might break down, but it's a good rule for you to kind of follow if you're navigating this process, right? So but there is also overspending, right? Where like the benefits, the diminishing returns on that spend, happen quickly, right? So it's like there's not a big reason for you to go from spending $60,000 to $100,000 on a website, right? Like you're overvaluing the website. That difference, that $40,000 difference, should be spent, on content marketing, or for your constituents, or like, outreach for your cause, or like, growing your volunteer base, right? Like, so there is a sweet spot, and this is this section here where you should be spending. There's a nice zone of spend that gets you the greatest return on your investment, right? And this isn't just for websites. This is for anything. The what you spend, what you get kind of S curve rules a lot of what we purchase, what we invest in, what we buy. Consider that with the website, right? Like the less you spend, the less you can expect. And so for you, it's about deciding what is this curve look like. And where is your sweet spot, right? So I kind of a rule of thumb, and this is just from our research, our experience with, client budgets and client revenues and website costs, and that, you should be spending at least 4% of your annual revenue on your new website, right? That's a sign of you're taking it seriously. You're looking for serious partners. It's something you guys care about. You're committed to. If you spend less than that, you're gonna not care too much about the outcome. There's all sorts of reasons why underspending is a problem. Earmark 4% of it for the website, and that's even kind of low. I mean, we've seen from other designers and other developers out there, we've seen things, we've seen 8%, 9%, 10% of your annual revenue on your new website. At least 4%. Like if you're spending less than 4% of your annual revenue, if you're making $100,000 a year and you're spending $100,000 on your website, that's not that what you're going to get is not going to be a good representation of your organization. People are going to take you less seriously because the quality of your website will be diminished. So okay, so let's talk about picking your partner, right? So this is really important. I think this is actually becoming even more important with the rise of AI and AI design tools and AI kind of development tools, because the differentiator between firms is no longer going to come down to just like who has better looking websites, right? It's going to come down to what websites work better, but also like who is more enjoyable to work with, right? If everybody's able to, in the next 5 to 10 years, if everybody's able to design exceptional websites because they prompt AI tools to do it, it's like, well, then there's a different criteria for evaluating your partner, right? Then it becomes about, well, who does it in a way that like I enjoy working with, and like they respect me, and like they are professional, and they're responsive, or they're fast, or they're cheap. These are the things you need to ask yourself. Things to consider as well before we get into this is that web design has a really low barrier to entry, right? Like this is the reason people kind of think that websites are cheap or simple, is because anybody with a computer can do it, right? Like anybody with a computer can spin up a website. They can open up a Wix, Weebly, Squarespace, whatever. There's all sorts of tools for this, and like launch a website, right? So it's a very low barrier to entry. Because anybody with a computer and some time can build a site. So you should proceed with caution when you're evaluating partners, right? Like there's not really like a certifying body. There are for some specific skill specializations, but there's no general certifying body. And so you could, someone could make a website that looks good, that makes them seem like an expert or experienced, but maybe they've just done this kind of for a couple of friends, and now they're launching a company. You'll probably be able to suss that out in early conversations just around the way they present their products and their sales process and whatever else, but just proceed with caution. Partner types, we talked about this a little bit with the case studies, right? The tale of two websites. You've got the freelancer, the agency, and the Goldilock zone. And so the freelancer is the kind of the solo gun for hire mercenary, like army of one guy, right? Or girl, right? So cheaper, faster, less reliable, less comprehensive, right? Because it's just them, they can do things quickly. They don't need to there's not like they are the only decision maker on their side, whether things get done. So they're agile. They're typically cheaper. They don't have to they don't have other people on payroll, benefits to offer, overhead, but they're typically less reliable because they, if they're on the beach, in Maui, it's like there's no redundancy in their system, right? They are the product, they are the service, and they're typically less comprehensive because one person can't know everything that goes into an exceptional website, right? Like they just can't be design experts and developer experts and content experts and strategy experts. You can't wear all those hats. You can have some knowledge in all of them, but you're not going to get any sort of expertise. You're not going to get multiple expert areas. You might get one zone of expertise. Like they're a killer designer, but their development stuff is kind of weak. So then you have the agency. This was like Agency Adam. They're the most expensive, super comprehensive, right? Like they have a team of 30 to 50 people. They've got experts on every domain under the sun, ready to go. SEO, content, paid advertising, media buying. They can do not just the website. They can really extend their service offering to like end-to-end solutions. But they're very expensive, and sometimes they're overkill, like for what you need, right? Like the analogy of bringing a flamethrower to a moth. So sometimes that's not what you need. So the Goldilock zone is kind of in between, and this is what 118 Group is. So I'm kind of doing a shameless plug, but we're a small team. We have a diverse set of skills on the design, the development, the strategy side, and so we're able to blend, high responsiveness because we have, we're small enough where we can do things, we're nimble, we can do things quickly, but we have enough experts and enough kind of knowledge on our side that we deliver quality results. And so we don't have the same like expert bench that an agency does, and we're not as cheap or fast as a freelancer. So we kind of strike a good balance in the middle. And again, what's going to work for you is largely going to depend on what your needs are, what you prefer, what interests you, and like what's the context around this decision and this investment that you're making. Like I said, the freelancer pros: fast, lower cost, industry experience. May have industry experience, but maybe not. The cons, poor support, limited breadth of skills, kind of unreliable. Big agency, deep roster, ultra professional experience for clients. Typically, they're the white glove approach. Full service solutions. They do strategy and execution, but expensive, slow to move, less personal. And then the small team. The cons with the small team is that they can eventually transform into larger agencies. You might face those problems eventually. And with a small team, they're always hunting for that big break, that big project. And if they're working on your project and then they get a big opportunity, maybe they'll deprioritize your work for a new big client because this is a big deal for them. So that's the only con. I'm not saying we've ever done that, disclaimer, but it's definitely possible that like if a huge client came by and we had a huge opportunity on a project, it's like, we're a small team. We can only dedicate so much time to each of our projects. We might move one to the side to kind of take that on. It would just be the right move for us. So that's the con. You wouldn't have that same problem in the big agency. This is super critical, right? Like specialization, right? Like, and we talked about this, industry expertise. It's really beneficial to pick somebody who is a specialist, right? And that's like whatever you're doing, if you want it to be done exceptionally well, you need the person doing it to have done this a lot, right? Like a specialist sees the same pattern, the same problem over and over and over and over again because they've narrowed their focus. So they've developed incredible problem-solving skills for that specific issue. That pattern that they've seen, they make amazing connections. They understand that space. And so when you're evaluating partners, finding someone who, there's the horizontal and the vertical specialization, which I've shown here in this visual. Horizontal could be a platform or a service, right? And vertical being the industry, right? So if someone can solve your specific problem, whether that's websites, design, branding, social media, email marketing, they do that, and they do it in your industry. That's also the sweet spot, right? Like that is, you want that intersection of horizontal and vertical specialization, because that person is going to know everything about your problem. If they've been in this specialty for long enough, they're going to know your problems before you even articulate your problems, right? So because they've talked to a dozen, 2 dozen, 100 other people who have come to them with the same issue, and they've solved that problem over and over and over again. So consider hiring a specialist and ask people, like, do you have a specialization? Do you know what your specialization is? And there's a lot of generalist firms out there. Someone's not a specialist if they say we specialize in A, B, C, D, E, F. Email, social media, print, digital, strategy, analytics. It's like you can't unless you are a big time agency with a deep roster who's going to be very expensive. You can't specialize in all those things. You can't say you're a specialist of multiple things, right? So look for the people who can say, we do this for these people, right? We do X for Y. For us, we build WordPress websites for nonprofits. It's like you can say it all in one breath, right? So keep an eye out for that. I think it's a massive, it can just really enhance your experience and the quality of the product. Specialists may charge more because they've developed a specialized expertise, but maybe that's what you need at this point. So, all right, so that's the specialist. Do a quick dig on all these partners, right? Like you're kind of like reviewing options, portfolio, get a sense of style. Do you like their style? Again, if it's not all about what you like, it's about what your users like, what your audience likes. But if you just can't get with their style and the way they do things and the way they design their websites, you're going to have a hard time. That's going to be a square peg, round hole kind of issue. And then a reputation review, obviously, right? Checking out reviews. I've go both ways on this. A lot of times you see reviews can be curated. They're obviously only asking their good clients to leave them reviews. So it's not necessarily a real accurate depiction of their, 100% quality satisfaction. But if someone has no reviews, they're not even asking their clients for it. They're not even pursuing that strategy. That's a different red flag. It's like, well, don't you want to even look like you have good reviews, right? And if you don't, it's like, are you guys really in business? Is this a shop? Is this brand new? So even if they all kind of feel like these were cherry picked by their best clients, that's better than no reviews, because no reviews is a sign that they just are not investing in kind of in any of those the basic reputation management online. So quick dig, questions to ask. So the first one is, can you describe who your ideal client is? And this is how you get a sense of the specialization component, right? It's like, if they can't describe who their ideal client is, like to some degree of specificity and like detail, it means they don't know. They're just saying yes to whoever's coming across, the bow. And so that's a sign that they're kind of generalists. The other question with the website side of things is like, what is your experience like with clients after you've launched their site? We've just heard horror stories of people who spend all sorts of money in a project, the website gets launched, and then they're MIA. The quality of the service drops off a cliff after the launch, after they've gotten all the payment for the project, right? Like, so you want to ask, like, what is your infrastructure like? What do you offer? Like, how do you handle clients after launch who have questions or want to continue to grow or develop? And then asking this one, what do clients do that typically create the biggest headaches for you? This is a useful question just because sometimes you are your own worst enemy as a client, right? Like you think you know more about a subject than you do, or you're trying to like force your vision onto something even though maybe it's not the right vision. And so it's good to know like where you could create problems so that you can avoid that. Because at the end of the day, if everybody just wants a successful project, right? Like that, they want you to thank them, and they want to thank you for choosing them, right? The double thank you. So understand what you bring to the table, what baggage you bring to the table, or might bring to the table that creates the biggest problems from them and might create the biggest impediment to success. So what do clients do that typically create the biggest headaches for you is a good question. And it'll help you gauge how honest they are. If they're like, we never have problems, we love all our clients, there's nothing you could do wrong, they're lying, and they're lying, right? Like that clients create problems. That's a false response, and so you can start to gauge how transparent are these people, how like accountable, how honest, like how just real is this partner. And then so come prepared, right? So basically you need to start by understanding the landscape, and that's like language, tools, and strategies, right? Like if you come in and you don't know the difference between, you don't know any of the platform names, you don't know any of the names for, like it certainly is doable. They will educate you, your partner, hopefully, but it's so much more effective to just do a few quick Google searches, right? Like what are the keywords for website designers? Like what do I need to know when I'm investing in a website? What are some keywords I want to be prepared for? I was thinking about maybe including a lot of those keywords here, but that's so easy to find elsewhere. Just spend 10 minutes looking at some of the language, so that when you're in a conversation with a partner, you can suss out like if they're just throwing like fancy words at you, or if they're like they actually know what they're talking about. Tools, strategies, right? Like just be educated when you get in there. Find inspiration, right? So this is really good to if you can, it's a picture, or what they said, a picture is worth 1,000 words or something. If you can send a link to a website or organization that you admire, or that you like want to model yours after, that does a lot of the discovery kind of, language, communication, frustration stuff. It kind of just pushes it to the side. It's like, okay, well, this is good. We can do this. Like, this is how we're going to do this. Pick some examples of inspiration from within your industry. So, specifically nonprofits, specifically, SaaS, specifically, life sciences, biotech, to get a sense of that. And then agnostic too. It helps to be like, in general, what are some things that you kind of admire out there? What are some things that can help illustrate your vision? And then outside of digital too, like the amount of times I've asked people like, what kind of cars do you like, right? Like it's a weird question, and people typically are a little confused by that at first. But it's like, if you were if your vision were a car, which car would it be? Is it a Toyota, or is it an Audi or a Volvo? Like those are kind of metaphors or symbols that you can use to kind of hone in on what you're thinking. How do you compare your vision against what's already out there, right? So find inspiration, audit your content, right? So that's that's a huge part of the website, is like, what are you saying? What's your messaging? Like, take a look at it. When is the last time you refreshed it? Like, do you need content work? Like, maybe your designer doesn't do content, so you need to kind of be prepared for that. And then own it or delegate it. This is super important. Like, the amount of times we've worked with clients who take on a project as an executive director, or some, a role within the organization, and then they're swamped with everything else, and they never are able to dedicate the time to it. And so the quality of it is reduced, right? Like, we need, as your partner, we need you to be involved. That's why it's called a partnership, right? So if you're not going to be able to dedicate time to it, delegate it, right? Like, find someone on your team to be the point of contact who pushes this thing forward and dedicates the necessary energy to it. But be realistic. Like, don't own it if you're not going to be able to own it, because then your web team is going to be kind of sitting around waiting for some feedback, waiting to schedule a meeting with you. You're not going to be there. It's going to be 3 weeks are going to go by. Then it's going to be like, where are we? What is, like, I don't even remember what we were trying to accomplish here, because so much time has gone by, right? So own it or delegate it, but don't kind of half own it, half delegate it, right? Like, be clear about what, either you're going to step in and commit to this, or you're going to delegate it to someone on your team who can. Otherwise, you're going to get, you're just going to have a worse experience and a worse product in the end. So that's the full thing. We're early, 43 minutes. If you have any questions, right? So this is what we do. This is what I do all day. You can feel free to put them in the chat, and I'll take a look at those. Or you can shoot me an email. That's Dylan, DYLAN, at 118group.com. Happy to answer your questions. Happy to just chat with you if you want to, if you're navigating this process and you want some feedback or some input. So feel free to shoot me an email. Feel free to drop some messages in the chat. I'll just I'll hang around here for a minute to see if anything comes up. And then thank you. I appreciate your attendance. This is kind of one of the first webinars we've done on Riverside. We haven't done a lot of webinars in general. And so I know I talk fast. I know I blow through a lot of material. I know maybe the audio quality is a little iffy, but I hope that the quality of the message was, I hope that you got something useful ultimately. So thank you very much. And that is the end of the presentation. So like I said, I'm going to turn my video off, but if you have questions and you want to throw them in the chat, if you have questions, thank you, David. I appreciate you coming. I appreciate the kind words. And I'm looking forward to connecting with you next week. So keep that in mind. And have a good one. Adios.